The silence of a home has a specific frequency. When a home is happy, that silence is light, filled with the phantom sounds of children's laughter and the comforting hum of a refrigerator. But the silence in our house at 3 a.m. was heavy, like the crushing pressure at the bottom of the ocean. I sat in my wingback chair in the corner of the bedroom, a room that had witnessed 15 years of our shared history, and watched my wife sleep. The moonlight cut through the wooden slats of the blinds, tattooing her skin with bars of silver and shadow. Elena looked like a prisoner of her own making, peaceful in a way that felt like a final insult. "I gave you the only thing a man can never get back," I whispered into the darkness. My voice was a mere tremor, easily swallowed by the shadows. "I gave you my time, my dignity, and a second chance that I had to bleed for. And you used them all as blueprints for a new betrayal. Almost 1 in 3 marriages faces betrayal, and I was about to find out I was one of them. But this wasn't just an affair. It was an extraction." Hi folks. I never imagined I'd be sharing this story online. My name is Arthur. I'm 45, a high school history teacher. My life is dedicated to the study of the past, of empires that rose on grand promises and fell on whispered lies. It's ironic, isn't it? I could see the fall of a civilization 3 centuries ago, but I was utterly blind to the collapse of the woman sleeping 3 feet away from me. We have 2 children, Toby, who is 12 and possesses my stubborn curiosity, and Alice, who is 9 and has her mother's radiant, deceptive smile. My wife, Elena, is 41. 5 years ago, she did the unthinkable. She vanished for 3 months with a man named Major Sterling, a soldier she met at a charity gala. She claimed she was finding herself in the heat of a desert base. I forgave her. I believed in the narrative of the prodigal wife. I thought that if I provided enough stability, I could heal the part of her that reached for the fire. But as I sat there, feeling the cold weight of a burner phone in my pocket, hidden inside an old baby's first Christmas ornament in the attic, I realized that Elena didn't want to be healed. She wanted to be funded. I looked at the screen, glowing like a radioactive ember, and saw a notification for a wire transfer to a private account named Azure Landscapes. It wasn't a gardening supplier. It was her escape hatch. This opening establishes the savior complex and the sunk cost fallacy. Arthur, as a history teacher, intellectualizes his trauma, a defense mechanism known as emotional buffering. He believes his mercy after the first affair was an act of strength, but psychologically, it was insecure attachment. Elena's behavior represents sensation-seeking mixed with Machiavellianism, the calculated use of another's emotions for personal gain. The use of the baby's first Christmas ornament as a hiding spot is a desecration of family symbols, showing Elena's total emotional detachment. Arthur is experiencing cognitive dissonance, struggling to reconcile the remorseful wife persona with the cold reality of financial sabotage. For the first 2 years after Elena's return from her soldier phase, we lived in what I call the porcelain piece. It looked beautiful, but if you tapped it too hard, it would shatter. We went to marriage retreats, we took up pottery, we spent our Sunday mornings at the local farmer's market, picking out organic kale as if the weight of those mundane items could hold our lives down. Elena was a master of the long game. She would bring me tea in my study, her hand lingering on my shoulder. The room always smelled of her bergamot perfume and the old paper of my books. "You're doing so well, Elena," I'd tell her. "The past is just a prologue." "I don't deserve you, Arthur," she'd whisper. And I, in my infinite, arrogant kindness, would tell her she was wrong. But about 6 months ago, the atmosphere shifted. Elena started taking on extra projects for her boutique. She mentioned a contractor, Julian, who was helping her expand. I noticed the micro-movements first, the way she'd tilt her phone screen away at a 15-degree angle. The way she'd chew her bottom lip, a habit she only had when she was calculating a lie. Then came the red herrings. Elena began confiding in me about how difficult Julian was. He's so arrogant, Arthur. He's overcharging for the storefront renovation. I think I need to audit the shop's books. By framing him as an adversary, she made it impossible for me to see him as a lover. One afternoon, our neighbor, Mr. Vance, a retired postal worker with eyes like a hawk, stopped me while I was raking leaves. "Your wife's shop must be booming, Arthur. That silver SUV is over here nearly every morning after you head to the school." I figured they were delivering supplies, but the driver, he stays long enough to watch a movie. The rake felt heavy in my hands. I laughed it off, defending her. But that night, the smell of rain and a sharp, metallic cologne lingered in the hallway long after she had come home late from the shop. This section highlights the illusion of reconciliation. Arthur believed that by being the good man, he had earned a stable future. The reality was a facade built on his normalcy bias. Elena's tactic of negative displacement, criticizing Julian to Arthur, is a classic psychological manipulation to lower his guard. Mr. Vance represents the external objective reality that Arthur can no longer filter out. This block shows the transition from a fixed attachment to the beginning of hypervigilance. Suspicion is a weary, sickening familiarity. I didn't want to be a detective, but the historian in me knew that you cannot ignore primary sources. I began to document her movements. I'd leave for school at 7:30 a.m., but I'd park my car 2 blocks over and walk back through the wooded path behind our house. I'd sit in the thicket of pine trees, the needles damp and smelling of resin, and wait. Like clockwork, at 9:15 a.m., the silver SUV would roll into my driveway. I'd watch the upstairs window of our bedroom, the same room where I'd sat watching her sleep, and I'd see the blinds close. The sight was a physical blow to my chest, a weight that made it hard to draw a breath. The investigation moved to the house. I waited until Elena went to her yoga class on a Saturday. I went to the attic. It was hot, smelling of dust and stagnant air. I moved past the boxes of my journals and headed for the Christmas decorations. I found the burner phone in the baby's first Christmas ornament. My fingers were ice cold as I turned it on. The wallpaper was a photo of Elena and Julian in a car, laughing. But the messages were the true autopsy of our marriage. "He's so easy to manage, Julian," one text read. "He thinks he's being the bigger person. He's actually just a coward who's afraid to be alone. I've moved another $5,000 into the Azure account. By the time he realizes the kid's college fund is light, we'll be halfway to the coast." I sat on the dusty floor, surrounded by tinsel, and I felt a strange, terrifying calm. She wasn't just betraying our bed, she was stealing our children's future. The Azure Landscapes LLC wasn't a supplier. It was a shell company. She was funding her next life with the sweat of my 15 years of teaching. The key mistake Arthur identifies is unconditional trust without accountability. He realizes that his mercy was actually enabling. On a psychological level, Elena has devalued him. To her, his kindness isn't a virtue, but a vulnerability. This section reveals the double twist: the infidelity is secondary to the financial sociopathy. Arthur learns that trust is a contract, not a blank check. I didn't confront her that night. I spent 3 weeks acting like the perfect, oblivious husband. I kissed her goodbye. I thanked her for the extra work she was doing. Meanwhile, I was meeting with a forensic accountant and a lawyer named Diane who looked like she chewed through iron for breakfast. The day of my history teachers' conference arrived. Elena thought I was boarding a plane. Instead, I was at a local hotel with Diane. We watched the live feed from the hidden cameras I'd installed. Julian arrived at 10 a.m. They didn't just embrace, they started packing my children's favorite toys into boxes. "He'll be gone for 3 days, Elena said on the feed. "By the time he gets back, the locks will be changed. He won't even be allowed on the street." I didn't wait. I pulled into the driveway 5 minutes later. I walked through the front door. The house smelled of the expensive roast Elena was preparing, a goodbye meal I was never meant to eat. Elena jumped, her face turning the color of ash. Julian stepped forward, trying to look intimidating. I laid the stack of papers on the dining table, bank statements, the LLC registration, and the photos from the woods. I canceled the Azure transfers this morning, Elena, I said, my voice a flat, dead thing. And the locks? They're being changed today. But not for me. Arthur, I can explain, she started, the tears beginning. The remorseful wife mask was being reached for, but it was cracked. No, I said. I heard the recordings. I'm a coward, right? A saint who doesn't see what's in front of him. Well, the saint is dead. And you're trespassing. This is the collapse of the shared narrative. The point of no return wasn't the affair, but the discovery of calculated malice. When Elena weaponized Arthur's virtues against him to plot his financial ruin and parental alienation, reconciliation became impossible. Arthur experiences emotional detachment, a state where trauma numbs the mind to survive the conflict. The next 6 hours were a whirlwind of legal intervention. Diane had a process server waiting at the gate. Julian, realizing that Saint had teeth, slipped out the back door. He was a sensation seeker, he didn't want a legal battle over another man's children. I pulled Toby and Alice into the kitchen while Elena packed her things under the eye of a security guard. Listen to me, I said, kneeling at their level. I love you. None of this is your fault. Mom and I are going to live in different places, but I am never, ever leaving you. The legal battle lasted 18 months. Elena tried to claim I was mentally unstable. She tried to use the soldier year against me. But the paper trail of the stolen $60,000 in college funds was her undoing. The judge saw a woman who had systematically defrauded her husband. I took the house. I took 70% of the assets to recoup the stolen funds. I took primary custody. I didn't do it for revenge, I did it for structural integrity. A home built on lies cannot stand, and a woman who would steal her children's future cannot be trusted to guide it. This section depicts the transformation of the victim. Arthur's actions are guided by justice and protection rather than mercy. Elena's shift to vindictiveness when her manipulation fails is common in high-conflict divorces. The departure of Julian shows that affairs built on betrayal of a third party rarely survive the weight of real-world consequences. It has been 2 years since the Last Supper. The house is different now. I repainted the walls, no more bergamot and floral tones. The wingback chair where I once watched a ghost sleep has been replaced by a reading nook for Toby and Alice. Every morning, I wake up at 6 a.m. The silence in the house is light again. I make pancakes for the kids, the smell of maple syrup filling the kitchen. There are no hidden phones, no metallic colognes, no whispered lies. I still teach history. I have a new lecture on the reconstruction. I tell my students that rebuilding isn't about making things look like they did before. It's about building something that can actually withstand a storm. I saw Elena a few weeks ago at a grocery store. She looked ordinary. The sharp beauty was gone, replaced by a weary, frantic look. She tried to catch my eye, but I looked through her. She wasn't an empire anymore. She was just a footnote. I'm dating a woman named Sarah now. She's an architect. We don't talk about second chances. We talk about foundations. I realized that trust can break, but resilience can rebuild. I lost a wife, but I found my life. Nearly 30% of marriages face situations like this, and I was one of them. But statistics don't define you. Your response to the betrayal does. The story of Arthur and Elena is an autopsy of pathological betrayal. The central theme is that mercy without boundaries is self-destruction. Arthur's growth from a passive enabler to a decisive protector represents the ultimate psychological victory over gaslighting. Elena's character serves as a warning of compulsive transgression. Some individuals seek the high of the secret more than the partner. The double twist of financial theft layered over infidelity adds modern complexity. The final resolution shows that healing is the construction of a new, honest life. Arthur is no longer the saint, but he is finally a man.